Welcome back to our video tutorial on Leo Classroom Setup. In this particular video, we will assume you've already set up the faculty information and the syllabus class schedule, and if you haven't and you don't remember how, there are those two videos are out there. You can do a quick check. They're real short. If you've got any questions, you can always ask your course chair. In this video, we're going to focus on the discussions. We're going to talk about two different versions of the dates and times. One addresses visibility or availability, when students can see them, and the other one it helps manipulate when students can actually work on the discussions. So I'm going to talk about how to edit the visibility or availability dates, and then the lockout dates. And one little tip or a note is, I recommend that the discussions are visible or available to students to see for the entire semester, but you might want to make the lockout dates perhaps, and I say 24 to 48 hours after the preferred deadline. I actually, for the discussions, that's usually for quizzes and assignments. For the discussions, I like to give them an extra week, and I'll mention that or talk about that and how to do that in the edit of the discussion. So I'm logging in. I've already gone into my classroom. I go over to discussions, and then you'll see some model classrooms do not have a week 0. The calculus sequence does. It's purely optional. The week 0 is where students might do introductions. It might be where you drop in your Ask the Professor conference or discussion. It might be where you put a student cafe and things like that. But that's purely optional. So for some of these I've already edited, so I want to show you or bring to your attention. In this particular class, the official start date is January 11th, and I've set the week 0 to be available January 4th, and that's because students have access to your online classroom 1 week before the start of the actual semester. And I like to make the classroom have a sense of presence so that students who go in a week before don't feel like it's an empty class. And this is really important. You'll find there are going to be anxious students who will go in and say, I went into the class and I don't see anything. You really need to make sure, especially if you've been given ample time, you've been staffed before a week out. Now I was given this class after the 4th. I was assigned this class as a last minute emergency. So in that case, obviously you have no control over getting it in. But if you've been staffed for the class, you really need to have this classroom set up completely 1 week prior to the start of the class. And it's good to have some of your discussions already time released to be available, like the introductions, the Ask the Professor, and things like that. So here I've already set up week 0. So there's two main branches. There's this heading up top you're going to see, and that's called the forum. That's the umbrella for the week 0. The forum is going to be edited by right-clicking on that little triangle next to the title. Now the dates have already been updated, but I want to show you where I did it. So for the availability or the visibility, that's when do you want to set the students to be able to see it. So you click on this, you can click on the different radio buttons. If you click on forum is visible for a specific date range, you set the start date to be when you want it. I like to see it a week before the start of class. That's 1/4/2016. And you always want to set the release time to be midnight, at the earliest possible moment. In some cases you'll find this time by default is whatever time of day you happen to be working on your class. So make sure that gets changed to 12 a.m. And then the end date, I like to set the end date for the discussions, like pretty much any of the discussions, and I'll say what, to be the last day of class at 11:59. That's because I want them to be able to see it as a resource, a learning resource, throughout the entire semester, but I don't necessarily want them to work on it throughout the entire semester. So that's why we have a visibility versus a lockout. Now I want to display this in the calendar, and the calendar is where students will see prompts or updates or reminders in the news and announcements area that they have certain things due or coming up. And that's why it's nice to have this display in the calendar. Now the lockout is when do you want students to be able to work on this discussion? And it's the same thing. I want them to be able to do their introductions as early as a week before the start of the semester. But you can decide whether or not you want them to be able to contribute to the discussion as late as the last day of the class. I find that helpful for students on the introductions and ask the professor because they typically like to close out the semester with goodbyes and things like that. Lots of warm and fuzzy comments. So I'll leave the discussion thread for introductions open until the last day of class, and I put that in the calendar. So now I've already set up week 1. I'm going to go to week 2 and show you something completely from scratch. You'll see the availability date looks like a strange date. It's a random date, August 24th, 2015. Well, that date is basically a relic from when this model classroom was originally set up. So that's why you need to go in and edit this. Otherwise, students will never see this weekly forum or discussion topic. So the first thing you're going to do is click on that the triangle just to the right of the heading for the forum. And we want to set the availability or visibility to be the beginning of week 2. And in this case, week 2 starts January 18th, 2016. And I make sure that the start time is 12 a.m., midnight. And when do I want them to stop seeing it? Well, personally, I like to give them access to view it until the end of class. So I have that March 6th, 2016. Now unlocking it, I'm going to unlock it from the beginning of week 2, which is again 1/18, 2016, and I'm unlocking it at midnight. The end date, and this is a personal choice, week 2 ends January 25th. If you really want them to start working on the discussions at the end of week 2, I would build in a 2-day cushion or a 1-day cushion and say instead of locking them out at 125, I'd lock them out 126 or 127. But I personally have found over the years for discussions to give them an entire week extra. So I'm going to give them 2 weeks to do each of the discussions until obviously week 7, because you only have 8 weeks in a semester. So the week 7 discussion, they really only have a week to do. And I'm clicking to display that in the calendar. So what I've done here is in the forum heading, I've made the visibility date at the start of week 2 until the end of the semester. And I've made the lockout date from the start of week 2 and then 2 weeks later. I save and close it. Now that's all only for the forum. So all I've done now is I've changed the forum release and lockout. I still have the same dates of August 24th for my actual participation. So I need to go in and edit and I want to make, I just did something a little different. I right-clicked on the actual title of the topic. That's okay, or you can click on the link of the topic and then right-click here. Alright, so you've got basically the same idea. I want the start date to be the start of week 2, which is January 18th, 2016. It's midnight. Now again, this time might be different. You just have to make sure you always make your start time midnight. And then the end date, I'm going to make that 2 weeks, or I'm making that for visibility, I'm making it the end of the semester. Now for the lockout, it's the same idea. It's the start of that week, midnight, and I want it to end 2 weeks later, which is February 1st at 11:59. So students have 2 weeks to do an assignment, which is basically a 1-week discussion piece. And then when you go back, you'll notice in week 2, the dates now are the same. They've been updated to reflect the same available or visibility, and the same unlock and lockout. Alright, so I hope that helps. If you've got any questions, feel free to ask your course chair. Thank you.